We've all heard the phrase styles make fights. For odds makers, analysts and enthusiasts out there, coming up with an educated theory about how a fight will play out is a mix of X's, O's and those lines they always make on the TV screen during football games. Usually the outcome is what we would expect. The best fighter normally wins in what they are better at. Better wrestlers dominate positioning, better strikers landing more effectively and etc. And even with an upset, the result isn't completely unthinkable. Of course, Bigfoot Silva, who's been over 280 pounds at fight time, could knock out Alistair Overeem even if that wasn't what we expected. But sometimes even the most knowledgeable experts couldn't have guessed what would happen. Sometimes we see something that defies what we understand about style matchups and skill sets. Most of the time you can ride the horse that got you there, but every so often that horse betrays you and kicks you with its hind legs. I'm Tom from MMA On Point, and this is 10 times fighters lost at their own game. Number 10, Randy Couture out-wrestles Tito Ortiz. Getting out-wrestled by Randy Couture is nothing to be ashamed of. Before beginning his legendary career in mixed martial arts, the Natural was an elite wrestler with medals in international competition, along with his success as a member of Oklahoma State's Division I Cowboys. And after transitioning to MMA, Captain America was noted for always taking a strategic approach to maximize his strengths. But that was not the expected result when he faced UFC light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz. At the time, Ortiz was a wrecking machine with a then record of 5 consecutive title defenses. Ortiz, a decorated wrestler in his own right, made easy work of everyone since winning the belt, primarily relying on his ability to send his opponents to the ground with authority and controlling the clinch. After stalemating on the fence in early portions of the first round, Couture scored 2 takedowns before the horn sounded. Things then unraveled for Ortiz afterwards as the unrelenting 40-year-old completely steamrolled him on the floor, and he even received a literal spanking for being unable to adjust to the adversity. Number 9, Rose outstrikes Joanna. By the time Rose NAMAJUNAS was set to face Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the strawweight title at UFC 217, the aura of the incumbent champ had risen to mythical proportions. After successfully retaining her belt 5 times, Joanna was rightfully considered one of the more dominant fighters in the promotion, and whispers about her all-time status among other great female fighters were growing louder. Her Muay Thai skills shut down a wide variety of styles with breathtaking and violent efficiency. On the other hand, Thug Rose wasn't exactly heralded leading up to the fight, as her 1-fight win streak had many questioning why she was getting the opportunity in the first place. Even though she had a respected stand-up game, not many envisioned a scenario where she could outwit the decorated kickboxer on the feet. Instead, if she could initiate scrambles, perhaps an opportunistic submission would become available, but most thought Joanna's pressure and technical savvy on the feet would get the job done. And in a performance that would inspire one of Daniel Cormier's more memorable calls from the commentary booth, Rose applied her own pressure on the feet, stunning the champion and finishing her inside the first round. In an immediate rematch, she once again outdid Joanna on the feet in a clear-cut decision. Number 8, Tyron Woodley out-wrestled by Kamaru Usman. In his rise to the UFC welterweight title, Tyron Woodley made excellent use of his experience as a Division I collegiate wrestler, and that skill set was so dominant that it opened up opportunities to lay heavy hands on the opposition. Balancing those talents led him to notable wins against Kelvin Gastelum, Josh Koscheck, Carlos Condit, and Robbie Lawler, among others. And with all eyes focused on the absence of Colby Covington in the title fight and the debut of Woodley's friend and teammate Ben Askren on the card, Kamaru Usman as a challenger, well, seemed pretty underwhelming to many. With a seemingly lower tier Division II wrestling background and without the track record of game-changing power, many thought that Woodley would get his hand raised yet again. Instead, Usman would prove the naysayers wrong by completely dismantling Woodley over the entire 25 minutes. After a strong opening frame, a hard elbow from Usman in the clinch in the second sent the contest spiraling away from the champ. 2 of the 3 judges scored it 50-44 for Usman, while media scores ranged from there to an unbelievable 50-39. In one of the most lopsided title changes in history, Usman managed to beat Woodley in every way he just wasn't supposed to. Number 7, Amanda Nunes head kicks Holly Holm. It was the kick heard around the world. At UFC 193, Holly Holm was able to shock the world with dethroning the star power and Olympic caliber judo of Ronda Rousey to earn the women's bantamweight belt in front of a record-breaking crowd. That highlight stands as one of the more memorable finishes in the sport's history and was the 3rd time she pulled off that feat in her career.
What move you guys want to see? You want to see the move?
I want to see the move, yeah, the one that took Ronda Rousey out.
Fast forward to UFC 239 when Holm was set to face Amanda Nunes in an attempt to reclaim the crown. The idea of the world-class striker losing to the current dominant champion was actually expected. The path of destruction that Nunes entered the bout with, backed by insane punching power and an underrated ground game, was hard to ignore, especially considering Holm's mixed results since the Rousey upset. But what no one saw coming was Holm ending up on the wrong side of a shin-to-head collision. Without any head kick wins in her previous 23 fights, and Holm actually adding to her total just 2 fights prior, it was the most unlikely path to the inevitable. Number 6. GSP out-wrestles Josh Koscheck. As a former Division I NCAA champion, Josh Koscheck was easily one of the best pure wrestlers the sport of MMA had seen at the time. His consistent ability to send a fighter on his back and dominant position, combined with his, endearing personality, made him a nightmare matchup for most of the welterweight division. Coming off his upset title loss to Matt Serra just a few months prior, Georges St. Pierre had the tough task of bouncing back against the powerful Koscheck. Even though he was no slouch on the ground with a BJJ black belt and wins over respected wrestlers like Matt Serra and Frank Trigg, GSP's pre-fight talk that he'd control Koscheck on the ground was dismissed. Stunningly though, the man who had no formal competition experience in wrestling was able to take down the NCAA champ at will. Additionally, he maintained top position for the majority of the fight while denying most of Koscheck's attempts to turn the tables. While GSP evolved into an elite wrestler who could take down and hold down nearly anyone at 170, it was the first time we'd seen this more methodical version of Rush. Number 5. Cain Gasses vs Verdum. This entry is a bit of a departure because this is more about one fighter messing up as opposed to the other having a surprise performance. Cain Velasquez, long considered the key to winning over the Mexican audience, was returning for a near 2-year layoff as heavyweight champion. His return to face interim champion Fabricio Verdum was set for Mexico City at UFC 188. At over 7,000 feet above sea level, the air in Mexico City is notoriously thin and tough for athletes. Additionally, it is one of the most polluted cities in the world as well. But Cardio Cain was unbothered by that challenge. He opted to stay in San Jose, which is only 82 feet above sea level, for the large majority of his camp. In fact, he reportedly had to be convinced to make the trip 2 weeks out. Meanwhile, Verdum spent 6 weeks preparing in the region and gave his body an adequate amount of time to acclimate. And the difference was crystal clear on the night. The normally relentless pace of Cain slowed considerably after a blitzing opening round and helped Verdum secure a guillotine choke in the 3rd round to unify the title and prove that Mother Nature is the real undisputed champion. Number 4. RASHAD KOs Chuck Liddell. The Iceman built up an incredible highlight reel of savage knockouts over the years. As one of the first stars in the sport, Chuck Liddell built a reputation as an action fighter who, if given the chance to touch your chin, would certainly end the night early. While a wide variety of strikes led to his finishes, his overhand right was without a doubt his moneymaker. His ability to consistently land that blow was uncanny and set up so many of those signature moments. So just over a year removed from his title reign and fresh off his war with Wanderlei Silva, Liddell's quest back up the mountain would have to go through the undefeated Ultimate Fighter winner Rashad Evans. Despite having 2 finishes at that point in the UFC, Evans was primarily thought of as a wrestler who could grind out those close decisions. And Liddell's underrated wrestling ability made Evans's typical approach seem far-fetched. In fact, ahead of UFC 88, out of the 32 pros surveyed, only 3 of them thought Rashad would get his hand raised. That night in Atlanta's Phillips Arena, Evans would not only prove everyone wrong with a win, he'd do it in the one way no one thought was possible: devastating knockout. And to add insult to injury, Liddell would fall victim to a counter overhand right, the same punch that he terrorized the division with for years prior. Number 3. Cruz out footworked by Garbrandt. The footwork of Dominick Cruz is pretty much an urban legend in MMA circles. The consensus greatest 135 pounder of all time has confused and frustrated opponents for years with unorthodox movement patterns that, combined with a strong wrestling base and an even stronger fight IQ, have earned a ton of gold for his trophy case. After having the most active year in his career since his WEC days, Cruz closed 2016 with a title defense against surging contender Cody Garbrandt. With an impressive 90% knockout rate going into UFC 207, thinking the Team Alpha Male stand-up would win with a single kill shot wouldn't have been completely off base, but nowhere in his previous fights did he display anything close to the fancy footwork of his adversary. So when Garbrandt cut angles, became elusive and literally danced around Cruz, it was a complete surprise. Garbrandt cruised to a decision win and the bantamweight crown. Interestingly, he has yet to replicate the success after getting into ill-advised flat-footed brawls, leading him to lose by 3 consecutive knockouts. Number 2, Frank Mir breaks Big Nog's arm. The first time Frank Mir and Big Nog met, it was supposed to be an epic jiu-jitsu battle, as both men had long established themselves among the best submission artists in heavyweight history. Instead, we saw the birth of Golden Gloves Mir as he used uncharacteristically slick boxing to finish Minotauro. So obviously at UFC 140, when the two would rematch, a Mir win wasn't out of the question, but we still didn't know what a ground exchange would look like between the two, and there was a lot of speculation that Big Nog would have the advantage there. And as the bout began, Joe Rogan shared his belief that Nogueira's BJJ was just on a different level, and if the fight should hit the floor, it would play to his advantage. But in a strange classic MMA twist, Mir found himself stunned from Big Nog's punches and near being finished. But when Minotauro initiated the grappling, a near unconscious Mir would find a Kimura after one of the more dramatic scrambles in recent memory, and after refusing to tap, Nogueira's arm snapped, forcing the fight to end. Sure, we've all seen Mir break Tim Sylvia's arm at UFC 48, but what we hadn't seen was Big Nog getting submitted with over 40 fights in the rearview mirror. And number 1, Cro Cop head kicked by Gabriel Gonzaga. When Mirko Cro Cop made his way to the UFC, it was a foregone conclusion he'd have his shot at UFC gold. The Pride Grand Prix champion made a name for himself by head kicking his opponents into oblivion. And after running through an outmatched Eddie Sanchez in his promotional debut, the Croatian kickboxer was paired with Brazilian up-and-comer Gabriel Gonzaga at UFC 70 in what was supposed to be a stepping stone towards a long-awaited meeting with the champion Randy Couture. Despite Gonzaga having 5 KO victories to his name, he was primarily feared as a BJJ practitioner after meddling in multiple submission tournaments. Instead, the impossible would happen when a picture-perfect head kick sent Cro Cop to the floor in a lifeless heap. The stunned commentary team screamed almost uncontrollably as Gonzaga landed the unnecessary follow-up shots before an equally stunned Herb Dean would step in. Couture, who was a guest voice in the booth that night, watched helplessly as Gonzaga's right leg sent the fancy matchup to the cemetery. Thanks so much to the mean guy Anthony Walker for writing this list.
He's back.
You can follow him at AntWalkerMMA, and thanks so much to Max Randall for editing it. You can follow him at Max_Randall. Thanks for watching that video. Please do like and subscribe. We upload 3 jaw-droppingly juicy MMA videos a week to get your teeth into, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to follow us at OnPointMMA and Tom A. Ransom on Twitter, and you make sure you have a great day.